Hello, and welcome back to It's Just Tech. Here we explore the trends and topics shaping our world today, and it is getting crazier. In this video, we're going to dive into the gig economy, its benefits, historical context, key companies, and the financial realities that gig workers face. Stick around as we break down the pros and cons of participating in the gig economy in 2024. And just like the title said, this is a warning for gig workers in 2024. So let's get started. I have here on the screen an overview of the most well-known gig economy, and we'll go more into this in a minute, but let me get a little bit more background going as you kind of take a look at this list here. So let's start at looking at the benefits of the gig economy. Gig work provides flexibility, allowing individuals to choose when and where they want to work. And they were sold on this level of freedom. Why not just jump in, help out? Something like Uber, which we'll talk about a lot today, started out with the notion of, hey, give somebody a lift on your way to work on your normal path and make a few bucks. This flexibility is particularly attractive to those who were seeking a side hustle, just a little extra income or a way to balance work with their commitments. And really, this is how the gig economy started out in recent years. Companies didn't want to commit to employees. They certainly didn't want to get stuck with the load of pensions or retirements. And so this was a way to get their business off the ground with their exit strategy of one potential only, and that is the IPO jackpot. Meanwhile, churning through workers and using workers to get to their goal without having any attachment or responsibility to them. So this flexibility is really became attractive as it was sold and as they were told. In fact, remember early on in the years as different companies launched, they would get a bucket of money from VCs, and they would use that bucket of money to throw massive bonuses out to get people to jump on their platform over somebody else's. And as that dried up, the reality started to hit as to what was the earning potential of these platforms and what was the actual earning potential of the employees that were doing the many cases slave labor. And so this way to balance other commitments and freedom, really, as we look at, wasn't providing freedom or security. So the gig economy isn't a new concept. It traces its roots back to various freelances and part-time work arrangements. However, in recent years, the rise of the digital platforms has transformed the gig economy into a global phenomenon. And a lot of this came out of the funding and the structure out of right here in Silicon Valley, Menlo Park area, Sand Hill Road. This was a notion that they grabbed onto. Some of the key players in the gig economy include Uber, Lyft, Instacart, Spark, which is Walmart, and many, many more. But why might someone choose one company over another? Factors like pay rates, job availability, and personal preferences played a role. So let me take a look here and go back to the screen that I have up. And I think it's important to go through some of these. So we've got Airbnb, renting out a portion of your home, infringed upon hotel market. Couch surfing was a precursor. And I actually enjoy using couch surfing around the world where there was no fee. You could just stay on somebody's sofa and get to know the family or whoever's there. In fact, many of the places I stayed at, the business people were out of the country and were just trusting people to stay in their home. Often didn't even meet the homeowners, just a very trusting, kind environment. This really shifted into more of a capitalistic structure with the Airbnb motto. Flipkey was in that same space. And then some of these others, One Fine Stay, VRBO, HomeAway, and then the Chinese version as well. If we look at caregiving, care.com really became the number one as far as name recognition. There's a few more there. And then delivery. Delivery became massive, especially during the last few years of global changes, as we can politely call it. So we've got Amazon Flex, and this is a really important one because, Amazon Flex evolved into the notion of Amazon creating small businesses by giving seed money to individuals to buy the vans and to manage their own labor. So essentially, Amazon itself, the big conglomerate, was able to cut the major economic losses off their balance sheet. So massive depreciation of all those vans off their balance sheet, and the headaches of dealing with these employees that they didn't want to deal with anyways off their balance sheet or off their operation platform. And as I went through the process to understand and to apply for that program, I learned more and more about the reality of really sticking a small business person with a barrel of coal. And in recent years, that's come out. We'll talk about that more on another notion there. But a lot of drivers that had their routes dry up after the periods where people stayed in their home got stuck paying back Amazon massive amounts just for the vans and the damage and the wear and tear that they used only for the purpose of working for Amazon. So there's been a lot of millionaires that have come out of this and a lot who lost everything. And then as we go down this list, there's quite a bit of others that you might recognize as delivery, and they span out in different companies. We look at grocery. Some of the big ones I actually didn't see there, but of course we've got Instacart, and then food became a big one, especially during this period of time. DoorDash. Where else are we at? I don't know that we had Eat Street in my area, but definitely Grubhub and DoorDash became the big ones out here. Munchery and Order Up, smaller scale. I don't know where they are now. Postmates and Seamless is one that I hadn't even heard of. Apparently, they were acquired by Grubhub. And then, of course, once again, we have the name Uber Eats and the changes that it made. We had education, so there's quite a bit here in education. And then freelance work. Upwork is a big one here, and I'm looking here. I don't even see on this one, but we will discuss on future pages. The number one in my mind is always Fiverr. And I think I've used that from the beginning months it existed and absolutely love the concept and the way that they've grown and expanded to respect their freelancers as actual partners in the space. And then what else do we have here? Business and technical. Anyways, this is on, I just searched and Wikipedia came up. We know that Wikipedia is not the number one place for truth. However, if we look for the list of gig economy companies, then you can take a peek as well if you want to look at that. Okay, and then here we have impact on law. So we've gone through the key companies a little bit and the job rates. And so then if we go to the impact of laws, let's see here. So again, there's a lot of benefits to participate in the gig economy: flexibility, lower costs, no benefits, income, higher earnings, variety of jobs. And I think it's interesting that this is listed in a gig economy. So you can see that certainly from the corporate side, right? Lower costs, no benefits. This isn't the benefit to you. This is the benefit to the company choosing a gig economy over another method. So as we move into the history again here, we've got the gig economy is again not a new concept. And in this case, it states its roots date all the way back to 1915. We can find examples back through millennia, right? There's one form or another where somebody with money is trying to get away with using minimal labor and not call it slavery and not really pay them. But, that's what it is. But here in 1915, when jazz musicians coined the term gig to refer to performances, the term of temporary work to supplement a traditional job continued to grow. And by 1995, 10% of all Americans worked in alternative employment. And this is according to a source on LinkedIn. that was reported on Blue Crew Jobs here for your reference. Now, the gig economy has quite a bit of impact on the laws over the years. And let's see here. So we've seen a lot of challenges to what has been the norm. The gig economy had significantly impacted labor laws, as an example. The questions of worker classifications and benefits has sparked debates worldwide. As recent as last month, I mentioned in one of my posts the impact of Uber specifically in South Africa, as it changed from an American-owned company into one that is owned by individuals from India. Now that portion of the company was sold off, and the percentage paid back to the platform from the workers who were actually driving their cars, putting the wear and tear on cars, went overnight from 18% to 30%. They didn't get a vote or notice, they just got penalized. But it has affected a lot of labor laws, specifically in California. And let's see here. And in this case, in November of 2020, voters agreed to exempt app-based ride-hailing and delivery companies from the 2019 law by approving a ballot proposition. The proposition included alternative benefits for drivers. See, again, it's all propaganda and marketing, including a guaranteed minimum wage and subsidies for health insurance if they average 25 hours of work a week. Often I won't go to that next step of the law, but anyway, there's constant challenges, and somehow they carve their way out of why the challenges were even created. And as a flip side, the lobbyists for the trucking community in California didn't seem as strong as the startup funds that went into these ride-hailing companies, because all of a sudden truckers out of this same labor law could no longer own their trucks and run them in California, which meant we overnight had a decreased amount of driver ability, and they all had to be corporate owned, it was a huge mess of an industry that had been operating for decades and decades, generations. And yet, because of this other group trying to get around the system, they still carved their way out and really impacted so many others in this economy. Another law we saw, and I don't know that I have that one up here. Let me look down and see if that's on this page more. Remember, there's quite a bit in New York, and it wasn't just New York, it was around the world, as challenging the taxi industry became a really big deal, and a lot of legislation went into deciding how Uber, that was not a taxi and didn't have to bid for or obtain a medallion, could operate around airports, as an example. So there's been a lot of impact as these companies navigate the legal challenges, which will continue to shape the landscape of all businesses in that same industry sector, and specifically that of gig work. Now, potential issues for 2024. There's another one. And this was interesting, actually, before we move into that. In April of 2023, cabbies can't sue New York City anymore over the Uber Lyft impact on those licenses, which I believe are called the medallions. So they just said, hey, we're done. You can't sue us anymore. So all those rights were taken away. And yet here, there's agreement on the back end that there were settlements. Really hard to prove whether or not that went through, and whether or not it's just greasing one palm or actually helping the industry, which was the purpose of any agreed payouts. Now, so moving forward again, potential issues in 2024. So if we're going to look ahead, we have to consider the potential downsides. Why might the gig economy be a bad idea in 2024? Increased taxes are number one, and the IRS's stricter penalties regarding these taxes for underestimated earnings pose a significant financial challenge for gig workers. Many gig workers really have the notion that this is just a gig. They don't have the notion that this is a true small business. Now, I say many, this is definitely not the case. As I pull into my neighborhood Walmart, I'll see the same exact small business men, they happen to be men, doesn't have to be, but in this case, with their Priuses lined up, taking orders and moving on out. And I can find them throughout the day because they're very diligent and strict with their hours. They run this very much with their as a businessman's mindset. They know when to take the orders, when to drop off the orders, which region. They really look at the analytics on the back end, and they're very diligent also with their finances, using mileage apps, which are free to download on your phone to track which mileage is used for business and which is used for personal, and financial tracking software so they can tell you at any given time how much they're actually earning per hour, not what the stated rate is on the app for what they have opted to participate in, but after the depreciation of their car, and we'll go into those later, what their actual per hour rate is. And in that mindset, they also have the proper mindset to set aside those IRS taxes. But quite honestly, many gig workers don't have that mindset. They're doing this as a band-aid in their life and are very caught off guard at the time that it's time to file the taxes. So we do know that during this period of time, there was a lot of transformation, which brought a lot more people onto the platform. Good and bad happened. Again, many people lost their jobs or their jobs temporarily closed up. And although they might be in that space now, many had to remain in this space. They weren't prepared. They weren't of a small business mindset. They just kind of found themselves in limbo. And as the period of time went on, they really found an overcrowding in that space, and the law of supply and demand really set in early on, as I mentioned, when companies like Uber and Lyft wanted to have people join their platform, they gave bonuses. Well, those bonuses are long gone, and now even the pay rate has dropped. In fact, I recently read, and that might be one of these slides here, that right before Uber hit its IPO, I apologize, Instacart, right before Instacart hit its IPO, it actually dropped the per order rate from a guaranteed 7 to a guaranteed 4. That's a huge cut. Nobody could have seen that cut coming, but they wanted to trim and tighten up in order to look better for their performance of their IPO. So as we looked, we're talking about 2024, but if we look at what the gig economy outlook was in 2023, the projected gross volume of gig economy was expected to be $455.2 billion. And that was actually posted just a few months into a few months, actually a month and a half ago, right? And so we have to remember that even though these numbers are posted out there, I believe a lot of it is inflated. I believe that a lot of these gig economies are shuffling notions off or shuffling numbers on their balance sheets, for one, but without evidence or proof, and that's not the point here. I guarantee this 455.2 billion is not wrapped up in the amount of money that you and I would share for doing the labor for these companies. But if we look ahead here, the global gig economy market is registering a growth rate of 14%, 14.01% from 2024 to 2023. But how many more people are going to find themselves in this spot over the next few years? Will they share a portion of this, or will it continue to go to the executives? So what is the reality of the money? And we don't find the reality of those numbers readily available. So there are really significant challenges coming up. What are the financial realities of gig work? Gig workers are essentially small business owners, and they're responsible for covering their own expenses. For a while, I don't know if they still do, but Uber had a rental car program. So if you wanted to drive on their platform, no problem. Didn't matter if you didn't even have a car, they would lease you a car. However, the individuals that I interviewed who participated in that program didn't fare very well because cars need oil changes, cars need new tires, cars need maintenance. But also when these drivers are picking up and dropping off people, they're often not in their own neighborhoods where they know the streets. And several of them had fender benders or accidents. One had a broken axle. And yet they continue to pay for that vehicle to Uber. And meanwhile, they couldn't drive or operate the car. It was really indentured servitude. And we also see at the period of time I worked at Apple, Uber hit its IPO. And by that point, a lot of the core initial Uber engineers had already moved from Uber to Apple. So they were really excited for this IPO to hit. And yet Uber decided to shift the weight of the taxes onto the the employees rather than paying the taxes on their own. And there's a whole financial review on how and why the companies do this, but it certainly is never in the best interest other than the company themselves. And 2023 was known as the year the IPOs came to a screeching halt. A lot of the reality around IPOs just kind of paused. And that we're talked a little bit about this a couple of videos ago, and I'll go more into the IPO mindset and why when companies accept Series A funding, the only acceptable exit strategy is an IPO, which destroys all values and quickly there's a loss of any control over the company. But that's the reality that they were facing. And then, of course, oh, here we go. Instacart's IPO comes as the company slashes gig workers' pay. IPO valued Instacart at $10 billion, down dramatically from the $39 billion from 2019. But unlike its gig economy peers, and it goes into that, I'm not going to click on that, but that's qz.com if you want to read it more. It talks more about it slashing the pay right before it goes public. And we just see this happening entirely too often. Okay, where are we going here? But so again, I want to let's see if the next one goes into this. So it goes in a little bit more into the challenge or surround it. And I wanted to continue here with the financial realities of gig work. Gig workers are essentially, as we talked about before, small business owners, and they're responsible for covering their own expenses. And I want to break down some of these expenses. So we're going to look at that in a minute. But I want to highlight too, the IRS really tracks gig economy workers because they want to make sure that nothing slides off the table. And so they've got something called a gig economy tax center that is a useful site for any of these small business owners in the gig niche in order to monitor. And then, of course, there's small business tax calculators. A lot of individuals that I see on my platform use tools like QuickBooks. That's not necessary. QuickBooks now is somewhere around $50 a month for basic. There's additional fees left and right, and then they assume you use TurboTax. It actually adds up quite a lot for small business owners. However, there are free spreadsheets or tax centers or just Google information online. Here's one I pulled up, and it's driversnote.com. It tracks mileage automatically, and it monitors your income and expenses. And I haven't used this one, but it really looked like a nice, clean, simple tool, something that I would use if I was definitely in this market. It's got date, account, category, description, income, expense, and balance. Extremely simple. You could do it in Excel spreadsheet, PDF, Google Sheet. Again, I don't have any participation in this company. It's just an example of what you can use. You can create your own spreadsheet. A lot of these are apps. When I tested the market, I used Expensify. The entire platform for the need I had was free. I don't know where they're at today, but that's definitely one that was very easy to use and plugged in very, very, very carefully. So some of the expenses you're going to want to look at are lead to the financial realities of whether or not this is viable for you, including the wear and tear on your vehicle. For many, the more money you're bringing in for making deliveries, the more time you're in the car, the faster that car gets miles on it, and it's going to reach its end of life. Also, is there going to be an oil change or a transmission change? How about how often are you changing the tires on the car? What about the fluctuation in gas prices from year to year? And the importance of calculating not just your gross income, what the app says you just got paid for that delivery, but what the net income is after all these deductions. So I've created little spreadsheets over the year, but I like my expenses separate from my income. So I'll just put down wear and tear on vehicle, what the gross amount is, and what the net amount was as it calculated, dispersed indirectly to that delivery. Gas fees might be more direct. If you're paying for gas on a day or weekly basis, you can connect it a little bit more directly to each one of the rides. Oil changes might be an indirect expense. You spread it out over a period of time, and the extra mileage that is put on your car. And then I remind you, don't forget about the taxes. The reason that I'm saying 2024 is a year of warning for gig workers, that you either need to run this as a small business or you got to be very careful. The gotcha will really get you. For 2024, the IRS changed their tax rules yet again. But this is a huge leap. Previously, if a small business person set aside not enough money or submitted not enough money to the IRS, then the penalty of interest on that money was 3%. It has now jumped, not doubled, but almost tripled at 8%. So in the IRS's mindset, although it might not be your mindset, and it hadn't typically been my mindset, the moment you earn money, the IRS would automatically do their percentage. There's no delay. However, they kindly grace us with the ability to pay once a quarter or annually, depending on the prior year earnings. But that's a courtesy because they're a nice organization in their mind. But the moment you earn it, it is theirs. So it has to be set aside. And if in fact you underestimate your quarterly or your annual, then the percentage that they want of penalty just on the interest, this isn't the actual word penalty, but this is the interest portion, is not just a 3% fee, is an 8% fee. Now, in some economies, if you're a small business owner and you don't need to borrow money, 3% was pretty low for quite a while. And so if an individual needed to hold on that money a little bit longer and pay a 3% penalty to the IRS, that was an opportunity cost for doing business. And and just chalked up to a non-deductible loan. Not really what it was used for, but an idea of trading off and access to money that was already accessible to you. However, when you look at 8%, that's pushing a whole nother envelope. So small business owners in the gig economy really need to be aware of this. Now, there's quite a bit of conversation. Well, this doesn't seem to be, I guess, as evident to everybody, especially going through the last few years. I've always been told that there's two different doors in life. One is marked freedom, and the one is marked security. And those who choose security lose their freedom every single time. And we can see this because government structures know this. As soon as they threaten, then they cause fear, and then they roll out things to protect you while they're taking away your freedom, your personal rights. And they do this on purpose. They create a problem to provide a solution that is really their solution, their planned solution, not helpful to you. So in society that prioritizes safety as at the expense of freedom, personal responsibility can often take a back seat. This is from learnliberty.org. This can result in a culture of dependency where individuals look to the government for solutions to every problem, eroding the self-reliance and resilience that are essential for a prosperous economy. You got to choose freedom. You got to choose freedom for the right reasons. Quitting a job and not having a plan or a direction or a focus, and yet needing the finances to live on, you're still dependent and tied to the security of that money. You're codependent on an industry, whether your foot is in or your foot is out. But choosing true freedom is a whole nother conversation. And freedom matters. As we're looking around today, we're still very blessed for freedom. And yet the water's boiling. We're not going to have these same freedoms in a year from now. And we certainly have less freedoms than we did 3 years ago. So please, this is my warning in 2024 for gig workers. If you're going to be in that business, run it as a small business. Monitor it carefully and don't fall in the pitfalls of the propaganda and the marketing. The gig worker's dilemma. Gig workers must remember the golden rules. Diversification is one of them. Working for multiple gig economies reduces reliance on a single source of income, providing a financial strategy net, safety net. Diversification in any business, even in my business, that we're not in a point of time where you can have just one company anymore and assume that they're going to be faithful to you. I can't be on one platform. If we talk to Jason Calacanis and his initial platform on YouTube, Mahalo, you'll find out that even though he was deeply involved with the leadership and was referred to as a YouTube partner in the early days, they had no problem spinning that to undercut his company overnight. So I want to wrap up this part of the conversation and then move on to the next part here where we're going to talk more about those golden rules. So while the gig economy offers perceived freedom, it comes with financial challenges and uncertainties. Gig workers should approach their work with a business mindset, understanding the risks and taking steps to protect their financial well-being. Remember, the doors of freedom and security swing on the hinges of financial preparedness. And again, thanks for listening here at IJT. I hope you found this insightful so far. Let's go ahead and continue here. So again, the purpose here is to warn gig workers going into 2024. Beware as you navigate the pitfalls, especially with the IRS. So hello, again, It's Just Tech, and we're talking specifically about gig workers today. As we step into this new year in just a few hours, you might have already rolled into it depending on where you are in the world, it's crucial to be aware of the challenges that await us in 2024. In this video, we are talking about the warnings for gig workers and explore the key issues that might in fact impact the gig economy experience. And for so many who have been into this 1 or 2 years, or for many people like migrants into another country, whether it's the United States or the experience I just referenced in South Africa, they work kind of outside of the government structure. They don't have to have work permits. They sign on as contractors without valid information, and they're able to earn income as a gig worker and circumventing the normal system. So there's a lot of benefits and a lot of reasons why people step into this. But sometimes we've got to step out. So IRS challenges are getting stricter penalties. This is one of the biggest reasons why I'm putting out this warning. First on the list is the IRS and their increased scrutiny on gig worker earnings. The penalties for underestimating your tax payments have taken a sharp turn. The penalties for underestimating your tax payments have taken the sharp turn from 3% to a staggering 8%. And I just explained the details of that, but just a reminder, that's almost triple. This can have a significant impact on your finances if you don't stay on top of your taxes. The number 2 reason is the shift in the gig economy dynamics. The gig economy was once seen as a flexible side hustle, but more individuals have turned to gig work as a full-time venture. The landscape has shifted. Gig workers are now small business owners responsible for managing their own expenses, including vehicle costs, gas, and maintenance. And segment 3, the lack of loyalty of gig companies. Another important factor to consider is the lack of loyalty from gig companies. In the gig economy, workers are often viewed as replaceable and disposable. It's essential to understand that your relationship with these platforms is literally transactional, and you have to take steps to protect your own interests. Segment 5, financial realities and the expenses. Let's talk numbers. We've created a chart to illustrate the true cost of gig work, including wear and tear on your vehicle, gas fees, oil changes, and extra miles. It's crucial to factor in these costs when calculating your net income and preparing your tax obligations. And again, although we've got our spreadsheets, there's a number that are online that you can grab and many that would install right into your phone and help with the calculations right there as you're driving down the road. It literally tracks your mileage for you. Now, these gig companies, if you're delivering for Uber or Lyft, will tell you what your miles are. However, it's always good to have your own tracking of that. Also monitor that Lyft and Uber split fees differently. Uber pushes a lot of the fees onto the employee and charges the pass-through to have you write off the taxes if you're wise enough to do so, where Lyft allocates and only puts on to your 1099K what you have earned, not what the total earning is of the ride before the split, right? So from what I've seen over the last years, Lyft is a little bit more fair with that. So again, create some kind of chart in order to document this. Now, in conclusion, let me see what else I've got here. So gig workers, I've mentioned Fiverr. I've been extremely happy with Fiverr over the years and the offerings that they have. Here's one that I came up with just really quickly this afternoon. I've never tried this one. I don't know anything about it, but data annotation technician. Now, when I worked at Apple and ran the simulation lab, we had another team that did annotation. This is real. It's viable. This site says they do all the training for you. You work from your own home. The big thing is you're using your time as labor. They train you. You sign into your computer. You do the service. You log out. You move on. This is a viable gig job. Being out in your vehicle where you could get in an accident. And by the way, the moment that I tested Uber as I called it a social experiment back this is really in the early days, they immediately reported to my insurance company that I was now driving and my insurance went up and I've never been able to get it negotiated back down. So instead of putting all this heavy burden on your resources, isolating it into your time seems like a wiser process. So I might look at Fiverr and do a comparison, and then here's a data annotation company, do a comparison. And if this is a need that you have or an interest that you have, then absolutely feel free to explore opportunities along this path. Now, I also created a gig economy golden rules. I'll leave this link down below. And as you can see, it's got our Twitter channel down there as well. But my golden rules in the gig economy are actually pretty simple. Number one, platform diversification. Make sure you're not pledging your allegiance to one platform over another. If you're looking at being in the driving space, then do Uber and Lyft as an example, as many people do. They go back and forth between which opportunity is next. Spark is another one in the delivery space. But I might say if you're going to do this, run it like a business and diversify even further. Maybe one in the delivery space, one in the computer tech, whatever that is. Don't bite on them all at the same time. Take one and master it and move on to the next, but really build a strong economy for yourself and a business that can stand when the rug is pulled out of one or gas prices escalate in one, as a small example, that you can still move forward because these platforms are in no way loyal to you. The next one, gig economy golden rule number 2. Financial planning and expense tracking is a must. Make sure you run this as a small business. Plan the year in advance, allocate how far, what your monthly needs are and what your runway is. How far can your dollar stretch if something shifts? And be very diligent with your expense tracking. Not when you give your box of receipts to your accountant at tax time, but at the beginning of every month, establish what the expense allocations are, and at the end of the month, track what they actually were. There's a lot of simple ways to do this. Pen and paper are actually my favorite. Gig economy golden rule number 3, tax changes, the impact and awareness around it. Be aware of tax laws. Just you don't need to be an accountant or a formal bookkeeper, and you certainly don't have to pay for one. It's something that you can do on your own, but make sure you do it. Every once in a while, come up for air and take a peek at what the tax law changes are, how they affect small businesses, and what benefits you can have benefit of. Gig economy golden rule number 4, financial safety net. If we go back to the example of using your car to drive for an Uber or Lyft, what happens if something happens to that vehicle? Do you have insurance to cover you so you can continue while that car's getting repaired or replaced? What kind of financial safety net do you have? In any time in life, you have to make sure you have money. They used to say for a rainy day, but you don't want to wait for a rainy day. What if a fun trip comes up or there's something exciting, to make sure you do that? But you and I both know that many of us are not in the gig economy because we're on vacation or we've retired and we're just skating through life and we're out there for the service of our community. Many of us are there because we've lost our jobs. There's not much in a 401k. The economy shifted in a direction without us. So being aware that you've got to set aside for a financial safety net is really going to be key to have that in your mindset. Because if it's not in your plan, it's in somebody else's plan to take that money from you. Gig economy golden rule number 5, invest in ongoing education. Whatever you do in your life, always educate to keep yourself one step moving ahead. Whether it's, in this case, learning more about how AI can help your business or how you can incorporate with AI. What else can you do to maximize your opportunity when you have passengers in your car? Maximize your opportunity with thank you notes when you're delivering groceries. What can you do to get your survey count up? Look at education can be as simple as watching YouTube videos on how others run small businesses in the industry or platform that you've chosen. But make sure you invest your time in that and don't slide out of the ability to grab onto that knowledge base. And here's one more. I didn't put it on the list. This is one that I was just reminded about today on how absolutely necessary it is. Now, many people may scoff at this and say that this isn't, well, I won't go down that too far, but I do want to say that it is my belief that this is extremely important. And I'm talking about tithing. I really, really believe that not because you have to and not because you have a commitment, but out of 10% of your earnings, you give back into an area of your belief system. And in my section, that is 100% into God and the way that He is delivering and protecting us in society. There's a lot of reasons around that. We know that in the Old Testament that we were taught tithing at 10% and the sacrifice that went into that. I don't believe that there is a commandment or a mandate or whatever we want to call it in the New Testament. However, I think that the principle is the same, and we can see in our lives when we give freely with an open heart of our time, of our finances, uh, we get back literally more than tenfold. And you can see it over and over and over in your life. So as you set up your envelopes, an envelope for your survival or your daily life, an envelope for expenses, an envelope for taxes, an envelope for the safety net, an envelope for X group you need for your child's school, an envelope for tithing, I believe is of utmost importance because wherever we put our money, I believe is stronger than voting. We've known over the last few years that is putting our opinion out there may or may not count depending on what side of the fence wants to use it. But we absolutely have also seen in the same period of time that where we put our money either strengthens or diminishes businesses that have or do not have our values. Therefore, I absolutely believe that take a moment and look to your heart and see if tithing is something that you want to continue to do in 2024, increase in 2024, or roll it into your business plan because I think it's really necessary, especially moving forward into the craziness that we're going to see in this upcoming new year. So again, that's the gig economy golden rules 1 through 5 plus my bonus concept of tithing. Now, in conclusion, gig workers, 2024 brings both opportunities and challenges. Approach your gig work with a business mindset. You are the business owner. Stay informed about tax changes and diversify your income sources to build resilience. Remember, you're not a gig worker. You're a small business owner navigating a complex landscape. Stay vigilant, stay diversified, and most importantly, stay informed. I'm going to let you know that this channel, IJT, has really been evolving quite a bit. We're coming on with a new partner that's going to be launching actually as soon as next week with us. And we're really going to dive in a lot in 2024 into the AI machine learning space, specifically in fintech, which is financial technology. And we're going to take our foundational base up several notches to make sure that we together are empowered to move this community out of the very odd situation that we're in right now. As we raise up our arms and we say, yes, we exist. Yes, we are here. Yes, we are powerful. And yes, we are here to help. We're not here to protest. We're not here to push people out of the way. We're here to bring community back together again. So I want to thank you for turning in. And hey, we'll catch you on the next video. Happy New Year, everybody.